I'd like to call this board meeting to order. It's the regular meeting, May 19th, in the Southwest Licking Local School Board of Education room. I'd like to recognize all of our visitors. We have so many today, both in the room as well as online. If you would all join me in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, this is Mrs. Scher from Watkins Intermediate School, and my 5th grade class is going to lead us in the pledge tonight. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Jones, could you please call roll?
Sure. Mrs. Engel.
Here.
Mrs. Moore.
Here.
Mr. Vincent.
Here.
Mr. Zani.
Here.
Mrs. Spindler.
Here. Public participation? Nope, okay. I need a motion to adopt the agenda, and I will make that motion. I want one, with one change. I'd like to move public speakers Autumn and Lanier Crawford up to item 3. Is that okay? Or is that where it should go?
Yeah, it should be request speaker on.
It's not, but.
Yeah, it's there, 3, correct. Perfect.
Okay. I'll second that. Any discussion? Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes.
Mrs. Engel.
Yes.
Mrs. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Vincent.
Yes.
Mr. Zani.
Yes.
That motion passes. And we are going to recognize some of our retirees this year. So first up, we have Miss Brenda Carey. Thank you so much.
And if you want to stay up there, Brenda and Melissa
Yes,
will
thank you.
kind of talk about you a little bit.
Estoy feliz de estar aquí esta noche para hablar sobre la increíble maestra, Señora Brenda Carey. Clearly, I do not have the benefit of having been one of Brenda Carey's students. Google Translate just isn't quite the same. Brenda began her teaching career during the 1990-91 school year at Cardington Lincoln High School before moving to Licking Valley for 2 years. She's been teaching at Watkins since the fall of 2005, and her super chill demeanor and exceptional sense of humor have made her a student favorite. While it may be tempting to coast towards the end of a career, Brenda did exactly the opposite. About 5 years ago, after visiting another school during the September waiver day, she came back with an idea. I want to get rid of all of the chairs in my classroom. We were like, huh? She wanted to revamp her Spanish 2 classes to be a fully immersive environment based on the organic world language, or OWL methodology, which advocates for using the target language 100% of the time, taking risks, and actively communicating. And she did it. She pivoted after school had started, and she hasn't looked back since. Brenda's classes are full of students playing games and laughing and authentically engaging with the language. Her classroom is a lively, warm, comfortable place to learn, and she's one of those teachers that I wish my own kids could have. Brenda, we love you. Now get on the sub list.
And next, we'd like to recognize Mr. Gary Warrington. Thank you very much.
Who's speaking for Gary? Hold on, someone's speaking for you. Where's our... All right, Dan. I'm like, where's our... It was who? Well,
That's okay.
Dan is just as good as Megan, Gary. So get back up there, Gary.
Come on back up, Gary. So I've had the privilege to teach with Gary and work with Gary in a lot of capacities, and in the future as well, because Gary is not really retiring. Gary is moving to a new position. So a few things about Gary that really have stood out. Gary connects with kids, right? So I had the opportunity to co-teach in Gary's classroom, and Gary you could tell the relationships that Gary built with his students based on the interaction outside of class. So outside of the math teaching, whether it was at recess, lunch duty, in the hallway, you can see how kids respond to Gary and how they respect him and see him as a leader and as a mentor. The other thing that comes to mind when I think about Gary is the work ethic. So I am used to, when I was an intervention specialist, used to popping around different classrooms. There was rare a day when Gary wasn't one of the first people in the building. The amount of lesson planning he put into, a simple fourth grade math lesson was really outstanding. So the amount of games he would create along with like Joan George and with Megan Myers, and the amount of planning really that team put in to developing those kids was an example for all of our teachers and all of our staff that just go above and beyond. And so although Gary is moving on from fourth grade math, we are fortunate as a district to still have him in the district as a future EL paraprofessional / teacher. So that is a huge benefit for the district, for the kids of Southwest Licking. And so Gary, thank you, congratulations, but come back to work.
Come back. And finally, we'd like to recognize a teacher that all 3 of my kids had for PE, Mr. Gary Goodchild. Thank you so much.
Hi, Mr. Goodchild. Well, good evening, everyone. I get the honor of talking about one of our retirees, Mr. Gary Goodchild. I've had the pleasure of working with Gary the past 7+ years, so I've gotten to know him a little bit. So I want to share some things that I know about Gary so that you can get to know him a little bit better as well. Gary has 3 children on the next slide, Zach, Dustin, and Carly. He also has 2 grandchildren, Amelia, 4, and Eleanor, 1. Gary graduated from Eastmoor High School. I think it was like 1940 something, wasn't it? No, it was in the 70s. It was in the 70s. He's not the most famous graduate from Eastmoor High School. Who would be the most famous graduate from Eastmoor? Archie Griffin, that's right. So Gary isn't number 1, but he's the 2nd most popular graduate of Eastmoor High School. Maybe Ray. In my book, anyway. Gary received his bachelor degree from The Ohio State University in 1980 with a BS in education. And then in 2016, he received his master's degree in educational leadership from Ashland University. Gary didn't go into education right away. He started his career path in hotel management, where he worked at various levels of administration for cross-country ends. 16 years. Here he's pictured, not really, very, very excited, eagerly waiting to check someone in. Gary then switched careers and began his educational path at Olentangy Schools, where he stayed for 3 years. While at Olentangy, he taught health, physical science, driver's ed. He coached middle school basketball and reserve high school baseball. He then started his career in the best school district in Central Ohio. That's right, the Southwest Licking. In 2003, he started as a sub at Etna Elementary. He worked at Etna for a total of 10 years. At Watkins Middle School, he was there for 2, and at Kirkersville for 7. Some of Gary's hobbies are, he is an avid golfer, loves to golf. Apparently, he likes art and Bob Ross. He's a hiker. And Gary knows a ton about birds. In fact, he's our bird expert. He did a lot at Kirkersville, where he had bird houses in our courtyard. Our courtyard was awesome. He was there on the weekends filling it up. So that is a Baltimore Oriole And we talked about them a couple years ago. He had them at his feeder. So just about a week and a half ago, one came to our house, and my wife was so excited. So we couldn't wait to share that with Gary. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit of Gary's talents. So I want to tell you just a few things. It'd be, the evening, it'd take a long time to talk about all of them. I'm just going to talk about a few. So Gary is a great organizer. He organizes a Groundhog Day bowling tournament. And it's actually a lot of fun. I went this year. You can't see on that check, but in the memo line it says Shadow Bank, and it is signed by Bill Murray. So Gary has a good sense of humor. He actually this year scored, I think, 230 something, 240. Wow. He was the high scorer this year. Nice. So he's a good athlete. He also organizes an awesome field day for our students. He's real detailed. He plans with teachers and parents. The kids go through stations. They love it. They look forward to it. They do a fun run at the end. The winner runs at the end. The winner of each class runs at the end against the winners of the school. It's a lot of fun there. The kids are all lined up waiting for the final run of the day. He's also great. The Kids Heart Challenge, he's organized that the last several years. We raised over $11,000 this past year. He's fantastic at making graphs. He has great handwriting. He's just totally into it. He also does a fantastic impression of Little Sweet. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Little Sweet. Gary, would you do that? Okay. Maybe later. He uses a falsetto voice. It's really, really good. So, last talent I want to talk about is one that I think everybody really needs to know. You can go to the next slide. Gary is a fine dancer. He's a really fine dancer. He gets mad when I say this, but all you have to do is invite him to a wedding and you just sit back and watch the magic happen. So Gary and I have spent a lot of time together on bus duty. We had 3 rounds of bus duty in the morning, 3 rounds in the afternoon for a few years. So we got to talk about all sorts of things. We talked about politics and religion, all the stuff you're not supposed to. Talked about life in general. And probably the most important subject we talk about, music trivia. That's right. We had some inside jokes. We would talk about things. So I created some Word documents over the years just for fun, and I'd slip them in his mailbox, not on company time, of course. But I'd put them in his room or hang them up somewhere. Well, I didn't know, but he saved all of them over the years and has them hanging inside of his cabinet in his office. And so there is just an example of some of Gary's musical taste. It's a little eclectic, I give you that. So some Tom Jones and Dion and the Thompson twins. So we've had a lot of fun. I appreciate the fact that Gary's a good sport and he allows me to tease him. He's got a great sense of humor. But one thing I wanted to leave people with, Gary is really good at what he does, being an educator. In 2009, he received the Coughlin You Make a Difference Award, Teacher of the Year for Southwest Licking. Very impressive. I don't think physical education is just a filler in school so that teachers can have a planning time. I think it's really important that students have this time. Gary's lessons are purposeful, they're well planned out. The students love going to gym class, they look forward to it. He teaches lifelong skills. His class provides the joy that you love to see children display. I always tell new staff they need to go in and see his classroom management. Students take responsibility for their actions. They come in, sit down, listen. They do warm-ups, run laps, and then they do a well-organized activity. I think it's cool that they rate themselves when they're done running and they get a star at the end if they've earned that. I've observed his class so much I could practically teach it from memory. When students work hard on academics all day, they need that healthy outlet just like we do, and Gary has provided that. I appreciate people who put their heart in what they do and push themselves to do things with excellence, and Gary has done this. Well, Gary, if this isn't enough, I'm going to end with a cheesy poem. You leave us on two notes, Gary, one good and one bad. The first one leaves us happy, and the second one makes us sad. You're retiring and going elsewhere, and that is great news, but the fact that you're going is giving us all the blues. Mr. Goodchild, we appreciate all you've done for the students and staff at Southwest Licking. Have a wonderful retirement. You will be missed.
Do you want to do? If the three retirees could join us up front for, come up front so we can take a quick photo, please. And I will get out of the view of the picture.
I think if you kind of set them center, then they can have the background, yeah. And then Dan will get it. I don't think so. Just that.
Thank you all again. I'm not sure how to follow that.
Yeah. I don't know that we can.
Tissues.
All right, so item number 3, request to speak on agenda items, Teamsters Local 413, or Southwest Licking Education Association. Okay, and then we moved the Crawfords up to now, so you won't have to wait through the entire meeting. You're welcome.
Can I give you guys a handout?
Sure, and when you start speaking, just name and address, and Mr. Jones will keep a timer for 5 minutes. And just so you're aware, we typically don't respond to stuff
Thank you.
unless we have questions.
Thanks.
Oh, you're good. You're fine.
So, hi, we're on your 326 Street. It's in the settlement, which is the development in between Broad Street and Foundation Park. We're here because we want our kids to go to Southwest Licking, but we're zoned for Licking Heights right now. The settlement has 205 houses in it, and only 30 of them are Licking Heights School District. And I think you're aware they're building Heron Manor, which is to the west of us, and it's planned for 151 houses. And our street, as well as the ones parallel to us, Alonzo Palmer, are going to be through streets, so they're going to connect the two developments. So out of the 356 houses in that community, only 30 of them are Licking Heights. So I think from a busing perspective, I don't think it makes a lot of sense because we're just going to dump lots of buses that are going through lots of traffic. And then, like, for instance, Watkins Bus would go down Isaac Tharp and pick up kids, and then they'd skip a group, and then they'd continue on to pick up more students. Another reason I'd like to be in Southwest Licking is because our kids play soccer for the rec association, or for the city Parks and Rec, and they play at Foundation Park right behind our house. There's over 500 participants in the spring season right now, and over 75% of them are enrolled in Southwest Licking schools, or they live in the district. So I think my kids, when they're ready for public school, they're in preschool right now, they'd have an easier transition into the classroom, seeing their friends from the field. I just think having all of it as one school district gives a better sense of community. I don't know the concept or what it takes to redistrict. If it's really hard, I'm sure. If it's easy, I just like it to be considered, and I think if it is considered, it'd be easier to have it done before Heron Manor's completed. if the students who are still in Licking Heights want to continue on in Licking Heights, they still offer open enrollment. So they'd have that option. At the very least, the houses that are sandwiched in Southwest Licking schools, I'd like us to have the option to open enroll in Watkins. I know Watkins doesn't have open enrollment, but just because the buses are going through and it's so big community, it would just make sense. So we're hoping that you would consider making it all one district for our kids to be able to go to Watkins schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. Appreciate the information.
Okay. Item 4, approval of minutes from the April 21st.
Motion approval.
Second.
Any questions? Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Zani,
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes. Item 5, treasurer's report.
Motion to approve. Second.
With the agenda is the executive summary for the month ending April 30th, 2022. Fairly routine month. We did get our final income tax settlement for the month, and it came in 30+% higher than we expected, significantly higher. It's 31.5% higher than we anticipated. In year to date, we were about 7.4% higher, and we had north of 6%. So year to date, we were 13.1% higher year over year in our income tax, which is a huge jump. I've never seen that big of a jump in 1 year to the next. It all came in that final settlement. So I don't know if some of it's COVID or what, but you know, with the kind of getting the schedule back on, but it was a good thing. It's about $485,000 higher than we anticipated. So year to date, we're about $500,000 higher than we anticipated. So that's good. State sources, we expected our homestead rollback from Licking County. We didn't get that until actually May. We did get it. It was lower than we anticipated, but year to date, we're still like 15,000 higher than we budgeted. So right on where we need to be at revenue-wise. So for the month of expenditures, it's a fairly routine month, nothing out of the ordinary. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, but we are running very well. We are basically 2% higher than we expected in revenue and 3% lower than we expected in expenditures. So we're running about $1.8 million ahead of where we anticipate being.
Does anyone have any questions for?
No.
Okay, Mr. Jones?
Sure. Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mr. Zini,
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes. Item 6, personnel consent calendar, A through O.
Motion approval.
6A through 6O.
Second.
Any discussion?
I can point out a couple of things. We do have an additional hiring of 7 teachers, so we've been continuing at a really successful rate of hiring fantastic people to join our team. We'll continue to see some of that throughout the summer, but hopefully smaller numbers. There's also a few job descriptions on here. Some are just clerical in changing titles, like maintenance and custodian. It used to be maintenance and grounds, and now that's separate, so we're cleaning that up. The OTA is an addition. That is something that we've always contracted out, and it will be more fiscally responsible to bring it in-house. So, and then there'll be a member of Southwest Licking staff, which should hopefully make it a much more valuable position to people when applying. So that is a new position. If you have any questions, Mr. Davis could add to that. And I think other than that, everything else is pretty standard.
Any other questions? Mr. Jones?
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mr. Zini,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes. Item 7, personnel.
We can take A and B together if we do C separately, please.
Okay.
Motion approval of 7A and B. Second.
Any conversation, discussion, questions? Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mr. Zani,
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes. Item 7C. I can move to approve item 7C.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Spindler,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mrs. Engel,
Abstain?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Zani.
Yes.
Items 8, business items. Do these need motions? Yes.
Yes. Take one or all of them, it's up to you. You can go through them individually either way.
Yeah.
Discuss?
Yep.
So motion to approve 8A through I.
Second.
So the first one is just updating the school district organizational chart with the creation of the EMIS position, and then there's the OTA and some other things. Just kind of cleaning up to reflect where our organization is right now. So this is the first reading of it. The second reading is just previous changes you approved last month. There's been no changes whatsoever to this. The third one's are ESC contracts. One's a general services contract. Then the other is a ED seat agreement. We're purchasing 6 seats for the coming year. Their last 6 seats, my understanding. So I'm glad we got them when we did.
Is that more or less than usual?
I think
Is that same?
So for this year, it's a little bit more. In past years, though, it's less. So typically, ESC still has seats added throughout the year if you need them. They've been having schools like Pickerington come out and purchase seats now, and so they are essentially out of them. So you can buy some
ahead?
Yeah. And that's similar to some of the other outside placements we work with. They're full and have waiting lists, which in the past they have not.
Okay.
Has Pickerington joined our ESC?
No, I know, so like Wilbur,
I wondered that too.
Pickerington, Westerville, they all play students there.
They pay a higher rate as a non-associated, but
But we joined them.
yeah.
Can we have a discussion with the ESC about,
I think it'd be prudent to have one, moving forward.
yeah, I absolutely think, because if they're going to allow people that haven't joined spots over us, then I think we need to have that discussion.
Especially with it being the Licking County
Right.
ESC, and none of those locations are in Licking County. Well,
Right.
Reynoldsburg kind of is, but it's mostly in Franklin.
Uh-huh.
How much placement do we do do we do any placement in Franklin County ESC though?
Not through so only through some hearing impaired.
Okay.
Since it's no county.
But there are Franklin County providers for Westerville and Pickerington and
Yeah,
or
Pickerington,
Fairfield.
I believe is new. Westerville, though, and Reynoldsburg, it's been several years.
Okay.
And why are they coming here? Because they're full and the other.
Because it's full everywhere else. Behavior in general, as you guys know, everywhere is significant right now. And so, and I know Phoenix was down for a while, for a few years, and so I think to kind of keep that cash flow moving, they did expand a little bit, but now we're, it's tight everywhere. So.
I'd like to see the discussion happen.
We can set that up. Dan and I can with the superintendent and the student services director there.
Yeah.
So there should be some preferred seating arrangements.
I was going to say, do we have any kids who are not getting seats because of this?
Well, part of the reason we purchased ahead of time so we could avoid that.
Okay.
Because we have 4 now, right? We have 4, we got 2 extra
Yeah,
seats.
and it's, it comes and goes. So,
Yeah, so it could change, yeah.
But the advantage to, waiting to purchase is we're not paying for seats we're not using. Now, there'll be a gap where we're paying for some seats that we're not using at the start of the year.
Okay.
Ready to move on there? Okay, D is a settlement agreement with the Teamsters Welfare Insurance over an employee who didn't sign for insurance time, so it's a settlement. And the majority of that will be paid by our insurance company through a settlement claim. E is a memorandum of understanding with the bus drivers on how they are, extra kids are given to the bus because of either somebody sick or somebody resigned and we eliminate the route. It wasn't really covered in the old contract, but this will allow them to get the $10, because we did have where if they double routed, they'd get $10. But in order to not basically inconvenience the kids by saying, well, so I can get paid, I'm gonna leave the kids, and they were able to do them on one route, but the agreement didn't cover that. So this will allow that if it's one route or a double route, they'll get $10 taking the extra kids home.
Right.
And we believe this is a better way of doing it.
The calendar amendment is to add 3 things to the calendar. One, it's the move-in dates in October for the middle school. So we're cautiously optimistic that that is a good finalized date based on the current progress we're making on the middle school. Disappointed that it won't be for the start of school, but it's better than January, which we originally anticipated. It also has on there the time over December to allow Kirkersville to move into the middle school. So we're going to create that gap between the October and the December move, so we have time to make sure the middle school is equipped and ready for the elementary kids. So that will give us 2 months to handle that. And then the third thing is a change to the first 2 days of school. So K through 5 will still do half the alphabet each day. At the middle school, the 6th grade will come day 1, and then the rest of the building, the entire building, day 2. And the same thing for the high school. The freshmen will come day 1, and the rest of the building day 2. Both principals felt like it was more advantageous for their building for them to have those new kids coming in as opposed to half the alphabet. So I thought that was a really good idea as well. Are there any questions on that? Okay. The Ohio High School Athletic Association is our annual renewal to that membership. Do you guys have any questions on H, employee? Okay. And then I is the overnight cheer trip this summer.
Where's cheer going, out of curiosity?
I don't
Ohio
remember.
University, wasn't
I'll
it?
say you guys, yep.
Ohio Northern. Is what
Ohio
There we
Northern,
go.
yeah, Northern, yep.
In July. I know it's in July, a couple days.
Any further discussion? Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mr. Zani,
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes. Item 9, treasurer's item.
Take all these if you would like to.
Motion to approve 9A through C.
Second.
Discussion?
A is donations. Again, we always appreciate those. B is some last minute statement of purposes coming in towards the end of the school year so they can spend some money towards the end of the year here. Is B. C is our 5-year forecast. This is another submission we had to do by May 31st. There really hasn't been much changes in the expenditure side. Exactly the same as it was in November. The only changes on the revenue side was the actual property taxes we collected, actual income tax we collected, actual property tax allocation that we received. So again, those are up about 2% higher than we anticipated, which that carries over through the forecast. School foundation, it's pretty much flatlined. It slightly goes up next year based on the second year of the new funding formula, but we don't know what's going to go after that point. So after that point, we pretty much flatlined it because you just don't know, because new funding formula can go away next biennium and we won't know what our revenue is. So everything else is well. So looking at the big one is 6.01 is we are projecting positive cash flow every year forecast except for the last one, and that it's about 900,000. So we are doing very well. Forecast, there is concern about maybe a recession coming in future, which could have a major effect on income tax collections and property tax collections. So that's something we definitely have to keep an eye on. But at this point, what I know at this point is we are doing well. It looks like we were doing well through the entire 5 years of forecast.
I have a general question that I've heard repeated in the community a couple of times. Do we have a dedicated line item for the football field when that needs replaced?
No, we do not have designated money set aside for that.
So
we
that
do
would-
have we have the contingency fund that we're using, but a lot of that right now is going towards construction. Obviously, we could use probably income tax JED revenue for that because it's a 1-year expenditure, not every 10 years, 8 years, whatever, so. But at this point, there's no specific money set back for it.
Depending on the timeline too, we may be able to use solar panel money.
I'm sorry, use what?
Depending on the timeline, we may be able to use the solar panel money as well.
Okay. You love that solar panel.
I do, I love it. But once it comes in, we'll love it.
Timeline of 23, 24?
Yeah, we're thinking more
24 now,
fall.
24 now, because we just got an
Yeah.
email that said basically they're running late, so they're expecting completion in the last quarter of 2023. So we hopefully start getting our first payment in 24.
And I think they said it was a good, maybe 2 to 3 years away from turf replacement.
Right, which is why it's when the solar panel money's coming.
Exactly,
Yep.
And I know that, I think that there's talk of, at that same time, while things are torn up, moving the track, because
Yeah.
we
Yes.
flipped the bleachers, the finish line should be on the other
Yep.
side. So when they do that resurfacing at the same time, to
Okay.
make it all,
Yeah, that'll be expensive too. That's another $100,000 for a track
I mean,
too.
it has to be done every so many years anyway, so it's
Yeah, it
probably gonna
does,
be
yeah.
due then anyhow. But anyway,
Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Engel,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Vincent,
Yes.
Mr. Zani,
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler.
Yes. Item 10, superintendent's items.
So tonight I wanted to share kind of the highlights of our recent enrollment projections and have them put it up there, and then you guys also have a copy in front of you. So similar to last year, Cooperative Strategies recently did our enrollment projections. I will send you the full comprehensive report for you to look at and cruise through and ask questions, but I wanted to highlight the specific areas that I thought were most important this evening. So go ahead. Wow, that's hard to see. Is that me or is that everybody? Okay, well, I'll just use my notes. So is there any way to make that bigger, Jeff, or is that just how it is?
There you go.
Oh, that looks, yeah, that's fine. Just right there, if you leave it right there, that's fine. So that's actually the area I wanted to highlight on the screen. So this is where Cooperative Strategies will focus as we continue to work with them over the next few years. These are the bulleted areas are the main leading changes for enrollment and for how things will increase and or decrease in the district. So boundary adjustments, new schools, school closures, changes in our programming. We talked about that, and they said that often, depending on what you offer and what you do, is shared, with other places and people, and then that's how, a district becomes attractive. Preschool program, changes in grade configuration, which I told them I don't anticipate that anytime, but they said they'll keep an eye on that. Interest rates and unemployment shifts, any intra or inter-district transfers if we did change any of our policies. Charter private schools, I do have a slide we're going to talk about in a little bit that's kind of interesting, that goes in hand with that. Zoning changes, annexations, unplanned housing activity. Harrison Township kind of snuck up on us with some additional housing that was not in our last year. So things like that maybe aren't on their radar, and when they reach out to townships or what we as a school district know, that will be considered planned but not built housing. School vouchers, and then the pandemic. They said the pandemic is going to continue to have an impact on schools for at least a couple of years. So these are the things that they're going to focus on when they continue to work with us, on our growth. Go ahead, Jeff. Yep, and you can pop it right up there is perfect. So the things I wanted to point out on this for the population and taking a look at the census is the second paragraph on the left. The difference between 2010 and through 2020 estimates. The number of children under 5 increasing by 15%, the school age 5 to 19 increasing by 6%, and then adults 65 and over is actually increased within our district boundary by 50%, which I thought was extremely interesting.
Yeah.
So, and then you can see at the top under total population just the increase over that 10-year span in our school district. Cooperative Strategies has said that is the number to watch. They said that's going to continue to grow much more rapidly than it has over that 10-year span that you're seeing. And if you guys, I'll keep going, but at any time if you have questions, just stop me. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm looking for the second graph. Keep going. Okay, so this is two interesting things. So this it takes a look at the second graph. Actually, you can put graph 2 and 3 up if you don't mind. The second one, the middle one, keep going, keep going, keep going. Perfect. So the top graph is public school, and then the bottom is private. So taking a look at that 10 to 14 age range, the targeted thing, if you look from, in the public school graph, your middle one, from 2010 at 92.8%, which it did peak in 13-14 to 95. Now if you look at where we're at in, again, 2020, down to 85.5% of that age group that's attending public school. And then the opposite, if you go down to that bottom graph, you'll notice in the private school, that same age range, 10 to 14, how it has increased from 7, it did it down to even 5% in 2012, up to 14.5 in 2020. So in talking to Cooperative Strategies about that, they said some of the increase in private school, maybe contributed to the pandemic for various reasons of, full school or not. But for our district, we've been in school. So I told them I wasn't sure if that would impact us the way it maybe did other school districts, because we never really stopped going to school besides that small gap when everybody else was gone. But they said, again, things to look for, things to watch. As that evolves over time, it's just kind of some numbers we want to keep our eyes on, just to have that knowledge. Go ahead. This will be hard because it's going to be, okay, well, perfect. Okay, so what to look at here is that red. That nice red is that red band is what we want to watch, what's coming in those boundaries. They said that is, you'll see in the chart, 7.1 to 13% population change. So they're anticipating that's where there's going to be heavy targeted growth in our district over time. So this map and those red areas are what we'll continue to look at as they update this each year. Okay, go ahead. I just wanted to point out here down at the COVID paragraph a little bit further. That's good, thanks, Jeff. They just talked about, again, they look at survival ratios, birth rates, all of those things that come into play when taking a look at a district. And they did say that, again, they want us as a district to know that the pandemic did create issues nationwide. So for those 3 years, 4 years, and maybe even they said a couple of years after, it's going to continue to be, we're going to continue to see different trends in these charts than maybe we would have before, or maybe once things have settled back to hopefully the new normal. Go ahead. So this is their upcoming for the next school year, their predictions. Now obviously most of the classes go by what our current enrollment is, and then some matrices they use to decide what is going to move in over the course of the summer. They are predicting 349 for our kindergarten class, so very close to what we currently are at 346. Now again, that's the prediction on kindergarten is a little bit more challenging because it's based on birth rates. So those are numbers that we'll continue to monitor and watch, and they'll change. I do think something important to note is a little paragraph above that shows the increase from what they predict, 4,725 students this current school year to a little over 6,000 by the 31-32 school year. And you can see that if you want to roll up a little bit, Jeff. No, the other way, sorry. That bottom graph there, you can see just the evolution of time. They do K through 12, and then the grand total for outside place, preschool, et cetera, you're looking at by 31-32. That's how many kids they're predicting we're going to have. And again, as you'll notice at the bottom, it says recommended. So when I send you the comprehensive report, it'll have kind of like a low, medium, and high. We're focusing everything on the medium. It's called the recommended. That's what they recommend. There are obviously 2 other strands that it could go, but that's where they said we should focus as we make our plans. Okay. Now we're going to go into the student potential analysis. Go ahead and keep going until you get to the little graph. There we go. So the gray is our actual. You'll notice in around 36, 37 is when they believe we're going to hit our peak. They said they think we'll have a little dip down after that, and then it'll slowly over time, kind of start to level out. So that's kind of the year that they believe we're going to have the highest increase in students, and primarily from single-family homes, which is where most of our kids come from. Okay, now, this is just, you don't have to read all this. You can scroll up on that. These are currently the 144 existing single-family home subdivisions we have. If you want to keep going, you're going to see a little bit into, there comes the apartments. Below that is the condos, the townhome, which is just one below that, the mobile parks, and then the scary page. What's to come? We can leave that up, Jeff. And so that is 23 new developments of what's to come, and that's what we know of as of today. So this is not, what's to come by 2036. This is what's to come in the next couple of years. So, the timelines are in there based on what we're able to get from townships and the cities, et cetera. Based on mature enrollment, not the maximum, you're looking at, from these developments alone, a little over 1,000 students, if all of these come to fruition with the proposals. The one I did want to point out is the third from the top, the Eastwood. That is the development in Reynoldsburg City that we're currently working with Reynoldsburg School District on, a potential land transfer, but there's no current update tonight on that. That's still in the negotiation phase. So that's the only one that really at this time could potentially come off this list. So as we have conversations, and as you're out at the ball fields and you're talking to your neighbors and people in the community, this is what's coming. This is what we have to start sharing with everyone so they understand growth is happening. It's happening rapidly, and these are all of the areas and neighborhoods that are currently in development, will be in development, or are coming very soon. Okay. The next, this graph, or this map, the thing to note is the dark blue. So the dark blue are all developable parcels that are adjacent to sewage. So you would be able to develop those at any time. The light blue are not adjacent, so it's not that land you couldn't build on, it's just not as simple. So when builders are looking for places, they're going to tend to head into the dark blue first. So those are, that's vacant land that's available that they're going to continue to keep an eye on over the next coming years as well. And I think we're almost done. Lastly, okay, so again, when you can leave that, that's actually good, Jeff, you can leave it right there. When they do this, and in the comprehensive plan, you're going to see 50 units, which is the 50 additional homes a year, 100 and 150. So again, we're planning on the 100 units a year. That's kind of your average. So that's where our intent is when we look for things and plan. And so you can see on here, again, looking at 2030, it's probably too tiny to see, but they're talking little bit under 6,000, and then into the 6,000s, hitting that peak, around the 7,000 plus kids, when most of us will be long and gone, but somebody else will be here. So that's what's to come, and it gives you all those years. And then lastly, the last graph. Keep going, one more. Yep, right there's perfect. That just shows you, if you're looking at the dark blue again, that breaks everything down by single family homes, the green, et cetera. But the thing to focus on is that dark blue, because that is the vacant land. That is where your sewer is at. That is the peak in there in the mid 30s of where, with that land, what we could be seeing even higher. If, again, all those numbers into the 7,000s, that's if all that land was developed that's available. So, you have to take a look at where is the peak with what we know is coming, and then where is the peak with what could be coming. And that's what Cooperative Strategies will continue to watch, and I'll continue to update the board. And hopefully, Rick and I will be back with the master plan, working with Garmin and Miller in the coming months this summer as well. Do you guys have any questions?
A lot of information.
And that's it for my report tonight.
Do they do this every year or
Every year.
twice a year?
Every year.
Okay.
Once a year.
Yikes. Anyone? Mr. Jones? Oh, we don't have to vote on it.
Yeah, that's just informational.
Okay, item 11, Request to speak on non-agenda items, Teamsters or Southwest Looking Education Association. Seeing none. Motion to go into executive session. I have to read that, don't I? For the purpose of employment of public employees.
Second.
That passes.
We didn't vote.
We have to vote. It doesn't pass. Do we vote? Sorry. Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Zani?
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler?
Yes. We are. All right. We are returning from executive session. Mr. Jones, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Engel?
Here.
Mrs. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Vincent?
Here.
Mr. Zani?
Here.
Mrs. Spindler?
Here. I should also mention it's 8:39 when we returned. We have item 13, the evaluation of the superintendent and the evaluation of the treasurer. We need a motion for that?
No, we haven't passed, but
Okay.
if you want to.
You want a motion to approve the evaluation of the superintendent? So moved.
Second.
Mr.
Actually, I'll move 13A and B, which are the both items, the superintendent and the treasurer.
And I will take this opportunity to say that the Southwest Licking Local School Board of Education has evaluated the treasurer, Richard D. Jones. We appreciate his diligence in working with his staff to develop policy and procedures to create efficiencies within the treasurer's department. The Southwest Licking Local School Board of Education has evaluated the superintendent, Dr. Casey Perkins. We have appreciated her leadership over the past year coming out of a national pandemic, as well as her forethought and vision for our district and the students we serve. Any additional comments?
Thank you both.
Thank you both.
Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Engel?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Zani?
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler?
Yes, that passes.
Thank you.
Item 14, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Mr. Jones?
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent?
Yes.
Mr. Zani?
Yes.
Mrs. Spindler?
Yes. We are adjourned at 8:41 p.m.